and 3, cspan.org, and C-SPAN Radio, with a replay of the day's hearing each evening at 9 p.m. Eastern on C-SPAN 2. Confirmation hearings for Ben Bernanke, live Tuesday at 10 a.m. on C-SPAN 3, cspan.org, and C-SPAN Radio. Pennsylvania Congressman Curt Weldon is investigating a secret military intelligence unit known as Able Danger, whose members have said they identified al-Qaeda terrorists in the U.S. more than a year before the 2001 attacks. He talks about his latest findings at this Capitol Hill news conference. It's about 50 minutes.
I'm Congressman Curt Weldon. Thanks for coming out today. Reluctantly, I stand to provide further information on the Able Danger situation. When I first started this effort back in June, when the full Able Danger story came to my attention, I said it could be anything from gross incompetence to a cover-up bigger than Watergate. I today will tell you, after months of looking at this issue, that there's a cover-up that's taken place and continues to take place, and therefore I'm asking for a criminal investigation as of this date. I just finished an hour-and-a-half meeting with the Inspector General at the Department of Defense. 4 employees went into extensive briefings, and they advised me there had been 2 other requests besides mine of their office, including a request from the Senate and other requests from the House. So there are 3 separate requests for an IG investigation specifically on Able Danger and the deliberate persecution, intimidation, and the ruining of Lt.Col. Tony Shaffer's career. It is absolutely outrageous at what's occurred, because an Army Lieutenant Colonel, Bronze Star recipient, has been punished and had his career ruined for telling the truth. The handling of Tony by the Defense Intelligence Agency is an abomination. The agency needs to be held accountable. They went to such extremes to destroy Tony's career that they accused him to both Wolf Blitzer at CNN and to a reporter from Time magazine that he was allegedly having an affair with someone in my office. They accused him of stealing pens that belonged to the government in a written document that I have a copy of. Well, it turns out when you talk to Tony, when he was 15 years old and his father was working for an American embassy overseas, he admitted when he took a lie detector test to join the military that he in fact had taken some pens and given to classmates in the school. The Defense Intelligence Agency actually included that without stating the facts of the issue as a reason why they should remove him. And obviously the theft of those pens took place when he was a youngster, 15 years of age. They also sent him a letter on September the 23rd from the Defense Intelligence Agency Counsel that he was not eligible to receive any more classified documents from his files, and he was denied that privilege because, in fact, he had no longer classified status. 2 weeks later, that box marked Defense Intelligence Agency, along with several others, were transported to his lawyer. In that box were 6 classified documents. The stupidity and the arrogance of the Defense Intelligence Agency was such that they actually sent back to Tony Shaffer 2 weeks after they told him he had no security clearance 6 classified documents. Also in that box were a bag of governmental pens. Now, they accused him of stealing pens, yet they sent him pens, federal property I might add. They also sent him a $300 GPS machine which belongs to the government. They sent him federal property, and they sent him the mail of other DIA employees. In fact, there are probably 25 or 30 bank statements, personal letters and information addressed to someone that Tony doesn't know, but included by the DIA, which in fact is a crime, being sent to Tony's office. This whole story is bizarre. This whole story is outrageous, and the truth needs to be told. The reason why the Defense Intelligence Agency is so aggressively after Tony Shaffer is because, in telling the truth, he's going to embarrass bureaucrats within the defense intelligence community. He's going to embarrass politicians in the previous administration and perhaps some in this administration. He's going to lay out a story that will be corroborated by at least 5 others that will detail the fact that the Unit Able Danger identified Mohammed Atta and 3 other terrorists in January of 2000. The story will corroborate that in September of 2000, on 3 separate occasions, attempts were made to transfer information about the Brooklyn cell of Al-Qaeda, including Mohammed Atta and 3 others, to the FBI. On all 3 occasions, lawyers within the Defense Department stopped the meetings from occurring. Those meetings have been corroborated by an FBI employee still working for the agency, who has in fact given sworn statements to the Senate Judiciary Committee. She also knew the purpose of those meetings. What is most troubling to me is not just that story that the American people and I support it with our dollars and our votes to understand what happened before 9/11, but we'll also learn the story of Able Danger actually 2 weeks before the attack on the USS Cole in 2000, identifying major activity with one of 5 cells they focused on in Yemen. 2 days before the attack on the Cole, I believe it was October the 10th of 2000, they were jumping up and down and screaming that something was going to happen in the port of Yemen. 2 days later, the Cole was attacked. I met with the commander of the USS Cole 2 weeks ago in my office, Kirk Leopold. He said to me, and by the way, his career is on hold by Senator Warner because he's being blamed for the attack on the Cole. He said to me, we had 3 options that day. I could have refueled my ship at sea. I could have taken her to another port. No one told me there was any information relative to impending problems in the port of Aden. That was 2 days before the attack on the Cole. 17 sailors lost their lives because that information was not properly addressed, even though it was made available to military intelligence. And then we had the 9/11 situation, where Mohammed Atta was in fact clearly identified before 9/11 as a part of the Brooklyn cell. And I now can tell you publicly that the 9/11 Commission has done nothing but hide this information. They have been unwilling to come forward to investigate. I sent the 9/11 Commission a letter dated, I sent the 9/11 Commission a letter dated August 10th to the 2 co-chairmen and all members copied. That's August the 10th. No response to this letter has come, and today is November the 9th. Now, when I questioned Lee Hamilton in a hearing yesterday, he said, well, Congressman, we're very busy. Well, they had time to send me a congratulatory letter for my work on interoperable communications. That came about a month ago. They had time for Slade Gordon to send a 5-page letter to the 9/11 Commission dated September 20th, which, by the way, they did not copy me on. So they had time to do all this, but no time to answer the initial allegations 1 week after the story first surfaced, and on 3 different days in that first week, they changed their response 3 different times. You can check the New York Times stories each day, and you can check their response. It changed each day. There's a cover-up here. It is clear. It is unequivocal. Now, why would someone want to cover up this story? Well, there are career intelligence officers who are going to be embarrassed by this story, including the current Deputy Director of the DIA. He was formerly in charge of human intelligence, and in 2000, a meeting occurred with Tony Shaffer and a 3rd officer where an attempt was made to brief him on the Able Danger material. And according to Tony, and we'll have another witness to verify this, he shouted out, I didn't see this, shut it off, I don't want to hear about it. And so he refused to receive the briefing, I assume, either because he thought it might contain information about citizens from this country or whatever other reason, but he refused it. Today he's the number 2 acting director of the DIA. Obviously, he and his cohorts don't want this story to be told. The DIA itself doesn't want this story to be told, because it will prove that a 20-member, highly talented intelligence cell did more than billions of dollars of intelligence investment could do, both before the attack on the Cole and before 9/11. Clearly there's going to be embarrassment within DIA, within CIA, and the established intelligence bureaucracy. There are going to be political people embarrassed. The staffer on the 9/11 Commission for Jamie Gorelick was Dieter Snell. Dieter Snell was the one who interviewed Scott Philpott in July of '04. It was Dieter Snell, an Annapolis graduate, and a man who will take over the command of one of our destroyers in January. His credibility has never been challenged by anyone in the Pentagon. It was Scott Philpott who was debriefed by Dieter Snell, who buried the story and did not allow the 9/11 commissioners to receive the facts of Able Danger. In fact, in talking to Scott Philpott, he gave me a direct quote from Dieter Snell. Now remember, the Congress, in a bipartisan vote, established the commission to get the facts about 9/11. And the facts obviously involved Al-Qaeda and obviously involved Mohammed Atta. In July of '04, a Navy officer, Annapolis grad, voluntarily goes in to debrief the 9/11 Commission staff, and he mentions that he will swear on his entire life career that he identified Mohammed Atta in January of 2000, and that his team had a chart with Mohammed Atta's name on it and face on it, but also that he saw that chart over and over again. It wasn't a one-time glance. And he also told Dieter Snell that they tried to transfer that information to the FBI. This was Dieter Snell's response, quote, "What do you want us to do with this information? We go to print in 10 days, end quote. Is that what the 9/11 Commission's about? We're going to print in 10 days, and therefore arguably the most important story relative to the run-up to 9/11 is going to be buried by a staffer who never briefs the 9/11 Commission itself, and I have that verified by two of the commissioners, John Lehman and Tim Romer. And for the 9/11 Commission to come out and say that Able Danger, one, didn't exist, and two, was historically insignificant is absolutely outrageous. 2 weeks ago on Meet the Press, former FBI Director Louis Freeh was being interviewed by Tim Russert. The first question was responded to by the FBI Director, our former FBI Director, and his response, which we can give you the exact quote of, quote, "We now have very honorable military officers telling the United States, Tim, that in 2000, not only had Mohammed Atta have been identified by photo and name, but was earmarked as an Al-Qaeda operative in the United States. Apparently this information was brought to the 9/11 Commission prior to their report. There's no reference to it. That's the kind of tactical intelligence that would make a difference in stopping a hijacking. We're very interested in what the 9/11 Commission didn't do with respect to Able Danger," end quote. So now we have former FBI Director Louis Freeh on the record, national TV, saying if he would have had that information from Able Danger, I might add, and he mentioned Able Danger specifically, it might have allowed the FBI to stop the hijackings, and the 9/11 Commission refers to Able Danger as historically insignificant. It's my contention that there was a deliberate attempt to not have this story be told to the American people. There is no reference to Able Danger in the entire 9/11 Commission report. There's been nothing but denial and spin since the story broke in the first week of August. Denial and spin. If you read the letter that was sent by Slade Gordon to the Senate staff, and he didn't bother to give me the courtesy to copy me on it, it's full of spinning, ridiculous malignment of Scott Philpott and Tony Shaffer and the facts. You know, Richard Nixon had to resign from office because he tried to cover up a third-rate burglary. No one was injured. No money was stolen. No one was killed. Here we have a cover-up of the single largest incident in the history of our nation, where 3,000 people died at the Trade Center and 17 sailors died on the Cole. There are people in both administrations that do not want this story to come out. There were briefings in January of '01. Now, Able Danger ended in '00. I wouldn't expect the incoming Bush administration to understand the nuances of Able Danger. But even though the program ended in 2000, and even though data was destroyed in 2000, there was a 3-hour briefing prepared and given to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in January of '01. A briefing for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and it's historically insignificant. There were also briefings on another program called Durhak Galley in February and March of '01 where Able Danger was discussed, which means there were people in this administration as well as the previous administration that had some understanding of the full parameters of Able Danger. Now, everyone has said everything's hunky-dory. The Pentagon says we can't find any chart. The 9/11 Commission is banking their entire denial on not finding a chart. This is not about a chart. It's about an intelligence unit of highly trained experts that had collected 2.5 terabytes of data about Al-Qaeda and 5 cells. But we have something new. Within the last 3 weeks, I've had an extensive meeting with Dr. Bob Johnson. Dr. Bob Johnson is Sam Johnson's son. Dr. Bob Johnson is a professor and IT expert. Dr. Bob Johnson was the manager and operator of the Garland unit of data mining separate from the Army's LEWA. Dr. Bob Johnson has not talked to any of the Able Danger players since the efforts that were taking place in '99 and 2000. And Dr. Bob Johnson told me that his unit also identified Mohammed Atta, not by photo but by name, before 9/11. So now we have 2 separate data mining efforts of the military openly and willingly stating on the record that they identified Mohammed Atta before 9/11. Interestingly enough, Dr. Bob Johnson's never been talked to because the 9/11 Commission did not use any of their 80 personnel to talk to Bob Johnson. They had no idea who Bob Johnson was or is, and neither has the Pentagon. His only discussions were from Raytheon management, he no longer works there, asking him what he knew. Never interviewed, never had discussions, yet Dr. Bob Johnson was fully aware of the entire Able Danger operation and supported it. His data was transferred back to SOCOM's headquarters in Tampa, where it may still be intact. Contrary to what the Pentagon said, in a hearing before the Senate Judiciary Committee 1 month ago, a lawyer, an intelligence officer for the Pentagon, said that the reason the 2.5 terabytes of data was destroyed was because of a 90-day rule. You had to remove data and destroy it if it possibly contained information about American persons not within 90 days, and that was why it was destroyed. That's a lie. Dr. Bob Johnson, when I met with him just a few short weeks ago, said, "Curt, I watched the hearings and I sat there and I was amused." He said the lawyer for the Pentagon at the time was a guy named Richard Schifrin. He said, "I dealt with him all the time." He said Schifrin knew what we were doing in Garland, Texas, and Schifrin said, "Don't worry about the 90-day rule. If you want to keep the information, just sign a document, put it in a file, and you can keep it as long as you want." So now we have Dr. Bob Johnson, who ran the Garland data mining operation and who worked with Richard Schifrin on a regular basis, totally contradicting what the Pentagon said in a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing 1 month ago. Dr. Bob Johnson told me the reason the Army wanted the material destroyed was because of a request that SOCOM had made to transfer that data down to Garland. The Army didn't want Garland to have it, and so within a matter of days they destroyed it. This whole story needs this country to scream and shout to investigate. There are just too many unanswered questions. When I got a call the first week the New York Times broke this story in August on a Friday, the story broke on Tuesday and ran Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and I got a call in my office from a woman who was on vacation in Boston who talked to my chief of staff and said, "You got to call, you got to have the congressman call me back, it's urgent." My chief of staff called me and I said, "What does she want? I don't even know her, I never met her." I said, "You call her back and see what she wants." So he did, while she was on vacation in Boston, and she said, "Please tell the congressman it's urgent. I did nothing wrong." It was Jamie Gorelick who called my office, even though I had made no accusations against her. Now, I've since found out she personally called the Senate Judiciary Committee staff on 2 separate occasions and gave the same message. I did nothing wrong. Dieter Snell worked for Jamie Gorelick. Dieter Snell was the staffer who met and debriefed Scott Philpott. It was Dieter Snell as a staffer who killed the Able Danger story from ever being publicly talked about. The American people deserve to have each of these individuals put under oath and questioned. This is not a third-rate burglary. This is a cover-up of the largest attack against our country. People don't want to be embarrassed. People don't want to have the facts come out. Well, that's not the way this country operates. So today I met with the Inspector General's office for DOD, and as I said, there were 2 other requests from both the Senate and the House for this investigation, which is now commencing. I talked to the head of the GAO last week. I'll be talking to him, and I've asked for a formal GAO investigation, and I am today asking for a criminal investigation. These witnesses, these military people, need to be allowed to tell their story. They have no agendas. Scott Philpott in January will take command of one of our destroyers. When you sit across the room and talk, or across the table and talk to Scott Philpott, you understand what's at play here. No 9/11 commissioner has ever talked to Scott Philpott. No 9/11 commissioner has ever talked to Tony Shaffer. Slade Gordon ought to go get a life. Slade Gordon, who has made ridiculous assertions, has never talked to any of the principals of Able Danger. I know there's going to be egg on the face of the 9/11 Commission. I know there's going to be egg on the face of intelligence officials and Clinton administration officials and Bush administration officials. But the American people deserve to know what happened. 3,000 people were killed, including several of my friends. Ray Downey was the chief of all rescue for the New York City Fire Department, one of my best friends. He was overseeing the largest and most successful rescue in the history of mankind when the first tower came down. I went up there the next day to be at ground zero with the firefighters, as I always do on disasters, and his 2 sons were on their knees looking for their dad because they too are New York City firefighters. I brought Ray's wife, his 5 kids and their grandkids down to my district 1 month after 9/11 to honor them as heroes in a parade before 40,000 people. One of the pilots of one of the planes was a neighbor of mine, Michael Horrocks. He left behind a wife and 2 kids. His throat was slit as he flew one of the planes into the Pentagon. The Horrocks kids deserve to know why their dad died. Yeah, this is uncomfortable. Yeah, this is stirring things up. But if we don't do this, then why are we here? I might as well resign my position in Congress if we're going to have a massive cover-up because people are going to be embarrassed. There are just too many unanswered questions. Lee Hamilton's answers yesterday were absolutely ridiculous. More spin. We can't find the Able Danger chart. Well, at first they said there were no charts. In fact, the Senate Judiciary Committee went to the Orion Corporation, who made these charts, and the Orion Corporation initially told, and by the way, they're now part of SRA, who's a contractor, by the way, to the intelligence community. The Orion Corporation told the Judiciary Committee they only had 1 chart. And these other charts couldn't have been theirs because they only did charts that were white. Throw them all out, John. These are all the charts. Spread them out. These are all Orion-produced charts. These charts were all done by the data mining efforts. So the Orion Corporation lied to the Senate Judiciary Committee staff. Charts on drug cartels in South America, on Chinese proliferation, acquiring our technology, on criminal activity in Russia and Serbia, on Al-Qaeda, on Russian generals, all data mining efforts. And yet the company said to the Senate Judiciary staff, we don't have any of those charts. They're not ours. Well, here they are. And their logos are on each one of them. And all of them were produced in the 99-2000 time frame. I don't know what to do. I don't want a commission to investigate a commission. So I'm supporting the IG investigation, and I've asked the GAO, and they do have criminal authority, to do a criminal investigation. And I'm pleading with Secretary Rumsfeld, and I'm now announcing the preparation of a letter that I'm going to get signed by members of Congress from both sides. And if I have to walk to every member of the House and Senate, I will, demanding that the Able Danger principals be allowed to testify. Now, the 9/11 Commission will say, we interviewed General Schumacher, we interviewed General Shelton. That doesn't cut it. They did not ask the specific questions about Able Danger that they would have gotten if they would have talked to Tony Shaffer and Scott Philpott. They refused to meet with Tony Shaffer. When he came back from Afghanistan in January of '04, after meeting with the staff directors in Bagram, they refused to meet with him. He would have given them all this information, which obviously someone within the commission did not want to know about. These people are good people. Scott Philpott, Tony Shaffer, the others involved, and there are 6 that we know of already that the Pentagon has acknowledged, have identified Mohammed Atta, and we'll state that on the record. They take the words duty, honor, and country seriously. If we let Tony Shaffer to continue to have his life ruined, then that sends a signal to every person that wears the uniform all over this world. You're expendable. Even if you tell the truth, you're expendable. Because we've got to protect the ones higher than you. We've got to make sure they're not embarrassed. We've got to make sure the story's not told. Scott Philpott wants nothing, and neither does Tony Shaffer. But they have a story that the American people need to hear. The problem in this administration, the previous administration, and the bureaucrats that were held over between the two is they know what the American people will say when they hear the story that I've heard. When they hear the unblemished story of the hard work, the significant work that Able Danger was involved with, that in fact identified the Brooklyn cell as one of 5 cells with Mohammed Atta and 3 terrorists before 9/11 and tried to transfer it. The letter that I am releasing today that was sent to every member of Congress in the House and the Senate, a copy of the letter that went to Arlen Specter and Pat Leahy, basically highlights a couple of bullets. I just want to read through them. And remember now, the 9/11 Commission called this effort historically insignificant, and as Slade Gordon said, it never happened. Well, at least 5 professional employees in DOD, it's now 6, including Dr. Bob Johnson, have stated on the record that Mohammed Atta was identified in name and photo prior to 9/11. It was not only done by the Army's LEWA, we now know it was done by another data mining operation in Garland, Texas, which Dr. Bob Johnson ran. We know publicly on the record 2.5 terabytes of data was purposefully destroyed. We had that testimony in the Senate. 2.5 terabytes of data is equal to all the printed material in the Library of Congress. None of it should have been destroyed. Because we now have Bob Johnson saying he had an equal amount of information in Garland, Texas, and he was told by Richard Schifrin, the lawyer for DOD, don't worry about it. You can keep it as long as you want. We know they identified 5 cells, one of which was the Brooklyn cell prior to 9/11. We know there were 3 separate meetings set up with the FBI Washington Field Office. The woman who set the meetings up has testified to the Senate Judiciary Committee that she knew the purpose of the meetings. And the meetings were canceled at the 11th hour by lawyers within the administration. And by the way, Gorelick was a part of that administration. We know that Able Danger briefs were provided to a number of operational and leadership intelligence officers prior to 9/11, including the DIA Deputy Intelligence Agency Deputy Director, who had refused to receive the brief before 9/11 occurred. We know there was a 3-hour briefing prepared for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in December of 00 and January of 01. How could you have a 3-hour briefing on Able Danger for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and have the 9/11 Commission refer to it as historically insignificant? I delivered charts on Al-Qaeda to Steve Hadley. The 9/11 Commission says, well, there's a dispute. Steve Hadley doesn't remember getting the charts from Congressman Weldon. Well, Steve Hadley shouldn't have said that. Because then, as I have to do in this game of withholding certain information until I have people try to undermine me, Dan Burton started talking, because Dan Burton was also at that meeting. Dan Burton back then was the chairman of the Government Operations Oversight Committee, and also at that meeting was Chris Shays. He was chairman of the Subcommittee on National Security for Government Office. So not Curt Weldon, but 3 members of Congress sat in Steve Hadley's office and gave him the chart, and Dan Burton testified to the New York Times that he actually showed the linkages on the chart to Steve Hadley. When the National Security Council staff liaison talked to my chief of staff, they said, oh, Steve Hadley's a friend of the congressman, please don't go after Steve Hadley. The press misunderstood him. He didn't really say that, Congressman. I'm sick of it, folks. I'm sick of it. Former FBI Director Louis Freeh on October 16th said what I just quoted you on. This information could have stopped the hijackings. That's not me saying that. That's not some local guy off the street. That's not some political pundit. That's the former FBI Director at the time saying it. And then we have the story on the USS Cole. When you listen to Scott Philpott tell that story, it becomes very emotional. Because he believed, as a naval officer, the information his unit identified on October the 10th could have stopped the attack on the Cole on the 12th. It never got to the commanding officer who I met with in my office last week Curt Weldon, and whose career has been put on hold by Senator Warner, blaming him for the attack on Lt.Col. I have no other recourse. The 9/11 Commission has lost any credibility whatsoever. They not have made any effort to get the facts of this case, and therefore there needs to be a criminal investigation of why it's being covered up.
Can I ask you about the Cole? What information, as specific as you can get, what information did they come up with? Did it go up the chain? Did they specifically get tactical, actionable intelligence, or was this more white noise type of stuff?
What we've been told is they identified through Able Danger, which Scott Philpott was running as a naval officer, they identified 5 cells of Al-Qaeda, one of which was in Yemen. And 2 weeks before the attack on Lt.Col, they knew that significant activity was taking place that was indicating something was about to occur in Yemen. 2 days before the attack on Lt.Col, they got significant specific information about an activity that would occur in the port of Aden. And from what Scott told us, they were jumping up and down at Able Danger to get the information up through SOCOM to
up through SOCOM over to
CENTCOM.
So what happened with it?
We don't know. That's part of what needs to be investigated.
But they sent it up and they don't know.
They sent it up. They don't know what happened. But it did not get to Commander Lippold, who I met with, and whose career is on hold because Senator Warner is blaming him for the attack on Lt.Col. And Curt Lippold, an honorable Navy man, said, Congressman, all I want is the truth. He said, I had 3 options that day. I could have refueled at sea. I had another port option, but I went into the port of Aden because no one told me that there was any potential problem there. He said, if I'd have had any information at all, I would have went to one of the other 2 locations to refuel.
How come the Able Danger guys didn't come up with this before, especially when they testified, or when the one testified?
Because he was only talking about 9/11. 9/11 Commission was only focused on 9/11.
But it was about the veracity of Able Danger.
Well, I mean, he may have, no, really, I mean, he had to ask them. Remember, the 9/11 Commission never went out on their own asking for this information. They were told about it by Tony Shaffer in October of '03. They met with him. And I'm convinced, I'll be honest with you, there were 4 staffers there. I think at that very moment, 2 things happened. Staffers on the commission knew where that story would lead and didn't want it to go forward. Second, DIA, where Tony actually was working for back in Washington, was never told that he was briefing the 9/11 Commission. Tony went to his commanding officer. He was undercover overseas working for General Bagby. He went to Bagby. Said, should I give them what I know about Able Danger? And he said yes. Because he never went to DIA. The DIA folks were outraged that he would tell the 9/11 Commission without telling them what he had told the Commission until after the fact. Now, we do know this, that after Tony briefed the staff, there was a request for information to the Pentagon, and there was information sent over from the Pentagon to the Commission. They did not send all the information to the 9/11 Commission. I know because I talked to the person who delivered the materials. I've talked to that person personally. And the Inspector General today got that person's name. So we know what was delivered. It wasn't all the Able Danger material. I'm convinced there were people in DIA that did not want that story to be told to the Commission intact. I think there were people within the 9/11 Commission who didn't want that story to be told intact. And so they ruined Tony Shaffer's career. So when he comes back from Afghanistan, he voluntarily tries to go in and brief Zellick, and Zellick says, we don't need you. Why would you tell the guy who was involved in Able Danger you don't want to talk to him? Why wouldn't you say, yeah, we want to talk to you and anybody else? Can you tell us who else is involved? They didn't want any of that. We don't need you anymore. So Tony goes back overseas. When he comes back in March, they pull his clearance because he transferred his phones on his cell phone, and it costs $60 to the taxpayer. No, they didn't want him having access to DIA headquarters where all the Able Danger materials had been.
I just want to be clear about something. When did you find out about this Cole allegation?
In June, when the story was first told to me. June.
And who is saying this among the Able Danger crowd?
The head of Able Danger, Scott Philpott. The guy who will take over a naval destroyer in January. Among others. Among others.
What tangible evidence is Scott Philpott or the other members of Able Danger putting forward regarding the USS Cole about what they knew?
Well, their own statements. I mean, you know, that's the problem with this. We cannot let Lee Hamilton and Tom Kane get away with saying, all he wants the chart. It's not about a chart. These aren't people that come in off the street who work in supermarkets or some other job. These are dedicated military intelligence officers. And they all have the same story. What do you think, they all got together? None of them had talked before this all came together. These dedicated military intelligence officers all coincidentally have the same story. I wasn't even aware of Dr. Bob Johnson until he came in to see me 3 weeks ago and told me he watched the hearings and he couldn't believe what he heard. What's wrong with the truth? There's nothing about classified status here. The bulk of what they did was open source. This is all open source information. In fact, John opened this up. This is a capability, the kind of which I want to expand to the next generation of data mining called Able Providence. This is what we're talking about. This is Al-Qaeda today. Our NCTC can't do this. The Information Dominance Center of the Army can do this right now. This is Al-Qaeda today. This was done through open source information. The same type of information used by the Able Danger team. And the lesson here is to not have this happen again and have a capability through Able Providence to give us this kind of ability to analyze where the emerging terrorist threats are going to be in the future. If we keep denying this and keep not allowing members of Congress, and they won't even let the Able Danger people talk to Congress now, they've totally gagged them, then how can we improve? I met with Gordon England last week for 90 minutes. He called me, said, "Congressman, can I come over and meet with you?" Gordon England's Deputy Secretary of Defense. When he left the room, his head was shaking. He said, "I don't know where I'm going to go with this from here on." This story has been about intimidation. It's about harassment. It's about ruining the career of a professional military officer. It's about denying the American people the basic facts of what happened to 3,000 human beings and 17 sailors. It is unacceptable. It's outrageous. It's un-American. It's undemocratic. It's not what our country stands for. If we can hold a president accountable for hiding facts about a burglary, then we certainly can have the American people understand that we need to know what happened with this team. The 9/11 Commission missed the boat. They flubbed it. They have no credibility on this issue whatsoever, even though I've supported most of their recommendations. Lee Hamilton did call for the witnesses to be able to testify. He didn't say in open. I'm saying in open. There's nothing to hide here. Let them all come forward and tell their statements as they're all prepared to do. You know, we have willing witnesses here. Tony Shaffer showed up at the Senate hearing in his uniform. Scott Philpott was prepared to testify. So was J.D. Smith. They were gagged. And we were told, oh, sensitive information. It's not sensitive information. Sensitive to the people that are going to be embarrassed, but not sensitive to the American people's understanding of what happened here. To me, this is the most important story of my lifetime. It's important to me because I lost good friends. And it's important to me because we lost 343 firefighters who I represent nationwide. It's important to me because we lost 17 sailors. We talked a good game. DIA has on its websites, "We want truth for the American people." Well, where the hell's the truth, DIA? DIA sends a stupid letter from their defense attorney to Tony Shaffer on September 23rd, saying that you can't have any more classified material, and they send him stupidly 6 classified letters. They accuse him of stealing pens. They send the mail, 25 or 30 pieces of mail from somebody that Tony Shaffer has no idea. That's an agency I have no confidence in right now. And I think there's an upcoming hearing for a new DIA director. I would ask the Senate to respectfully hold up any new leader of DIA until all these questions are answered by the current leadership. And let me add one more piece. Last weekend, in Florida, the Defense Intelligence Agency had its annual meeting of defense attaches. So all of DIA's attaches from around the world were there. A senior leader of the Defense Intelligence Agency told the assembled DIA employees that one of their top priorities this year was to kill the Able Danger story. That's a direct quote from people who were in the meeting at the Defense Intelligence Agency workshop that took place a week ago in Tampa, Florida, I believe it was. Is that right, Russ, Tampa? And they were told their #1 priority is not the intelligence for our security, it's to get rid of the Able Danger story. And that were the exact words they used in front of a number of people. It's only a matter of time this story's going to come out. And I'm going to continue to provide the information for these people to let you all help in this investigation. I can't believe the mainstream media turns its head and does nothing to investigate this. Yet they worry about whatever her name is, Plume or something. It's as disgusting as when I came out with my book in June and a CIA director from Paris by the name of Bill Murray leaked the information about my informant to a reporter for the American Prospect, and he's not been held accountable. There's no big story. He jeopardized the life of my informant in Paris, but there's been no outrage by the media that Bill Murray, former CIA station chief, was quoted as giving up the identity of a CIA-protected source. If there's a double standard in this city, I don't know what is.
You think with all this being so politically charged and the fact that it involves this administration and the one before it, how confident are you about being able to get enough support in Congress so it just doesn't look like it's Curt Weldon and they're saying, oh, there he goes again, and that'll give some credibility with more folks. But if everybody's trying to protect everybody, as you say, can you get that support in asking for these investigations?
Well, I think we can. I mean, throughout my career, that's been a part of what I've done. I was called a radical when I called for the Missile Defense Bill in 1998. Nobody said could pass, and that Clinton and Gore both opposed. And as you know, my bill passed with a veto-proof margin over the president's objectives and became law. That was my bill, H.R. 4. I was told that when we were told we could not overturn Dick Cheney's decision to cancel the Osprey. The Osprey is now in full production. I led the effort. I was called a radical. I've been told that on a number of occasions. I was told that when I came out with my book because the CIA wouldn't listen to my source. And guess what? They're now using my source. Does it take a member of Congress to have to write a book to get the attention of the intelligence community? I guess so. But that's what I'm here for. I'm not here to go sip the cocktails and go along to get along. If you're not here to do the job of oversight, then we shouldn't be here. I don't care what happens. Some say, well, it costs you the chairmanship of the Homeland Security Committee. So be it. Life goes on. Is that what this is about? Is it about me worrying about what somebody's going to think about me? I'm doing a briefing today at 4:30 to 5:30 for members of Congress, where they'll get the full story of Able Danger. I just told you 3 separate members of Congress have asked for the investigation now begun by the IG's office. One of them was a senator. I'm not going to name him. 3 separate members of Congress. I can tell you there are 4 separate committees of the House that are looking at this. There are 3 separate committees in the Senate looking at this. So to say that nobody's paying attention, I can't tell you the number of members that have come up to me and said, Curt, keep it up. We're behind you all the way. Now I'm out there throwing the spears, but that's okay. I don't mind that. I've got 3,000 emails logged into my computer from all over the country, from a network that's absolutely, and that doesn't include phone calls and letters, probably 5,000 people that are a part of an army that's going to demand that we get answers. You know, I can't understand why the mainstream media just doesn't get it. I mean, again, this is not the cover-up of a burglary. It's a cover-up of the biggest story in the country's history. Who knows? Maybe what was stolen by what's-his-face in the archives was a part of this material. The amazing thing is he only had a security clearance revoked for 3 years. What's his name? Forget. Sandy Berger. Here they've destroyed Tony Shaffer, taking his security clearance away forever, and Sandy Berger gets a slap on the wrist, and oh, you'll get your security clearance back in 3 years. And he admitted to stealing documents from the National Archives relative to information about 9/11.
Are you going to release those letters?
Yep, all of them, every one of them. You can have them all. The one I sent in August, Lee Hamilton told me yesterday, yeah, Curt, you'll get an answer to that. We were too busy. They weren't too busy to send me a congratulatory letter about my work on the interoperability issue. It's spin.
9/11 that sent you that congratulatory letter?
Oh, yeah, 9/11 Commission. I have a copy. We'll give it to you. They sent me a congratulatory letter about, and they've done press conferences around the country. You know, I'm sure that this 9/11 letter wasn't written by Slade Gordon. It was written by a staffer. This was on September the 20th. They didn't copy me, incidentally. They just sent it to the Senate. It's 6 pages long. Now, that's a month after I had sent them my letter, which I didn't respond to. They send this letter without copying me to the Senate, which I got copies from the Senate, trying to spin the story in their favor. They still have not answered my letter 2 months later. It's all about spin.
Have you ever talked to editorial board?
Have I? Well, I've done as much. There have been editorials written all over the country. We've probably had 15, 20. I mean, you know, I can only do so much. I've had one staffer work on this for 3 months. The 9/11 Commission had 80 staffers, $15 million, and they never mentioned Able Danger once. And when they're caught by the New York Times in a gross series of lies 3 days in a row and change their story each day about what they knew about Able Danger, They then come out on the final day and say, well, it was historically insignificant. Well, that's not what Louis Freeh said. And that's obviously not what the commanding general of the Joint Chiefs in January of '01 thought when he was briefed. It wasn't historically insignificant then.
The USS Cole investigation, they didn't...
Probably didn't touch us at all.
No, it wasn't mentioned. So was there a cover-up there? I mean,
Oh, there's a lack of information or awareness of it. I mean, the Able Danger Unit was a very select group of 20 intelligence people doing unusual intelligence work. This wasn't CIA, it wasn't DIA, it was a special operations team that was doing cutting-edge work that's now being implemented.
did they actually warn? I want to get down... Did they say, someone is going to attack a U.S.
No, they did not say that. I'm sure they didn't say that. What Scott has led us to believe is that they saw information that led them to unequivocally understand that something was going to happen in the port of Yemen involving an American entity. They didn't know it was going to be the Ecole, I don't think, but you'd have to talk to Scott about that. Scott can't talk to us. They've gagged Scott. He's not allowed to talk to Congress. He can't talk to any member of the congressional committees, so none of us can get the answers to it. The few times I've talked to Scott about it, correct me if I'm wrong, Russ, you were there, he said that they had 2 separate pieces of information, one 2 weeks before, one 2 days before, and on 2 days before the attack on the Cole, they were jumping up and down because they knew something was going to happen. They knew it was going to be at the port of Aden in Yemen and involve an American entity.
And you don't know whether SOCOM actually got
No.
as high as
He said he forwarded the information up. We don't know where it went to and what they did with it. That's a question that needs to be answered. Any other questions? Thank you. Oh, by the way, here's the documents that the DIA stupidly, they accused Tony Shaffer of stealing pens. They sent him a bag of federal pens. That's how stupid the agency is. They accused him of stealing federal property and assets. Here's a 300-hour GPS system that the DIA sent to Tony Shaffer. It's not his property, it's federal government's property. And here's the mail. Massive mail belonging to another employee of the DIA, I assume. Letters, bills. There's an insurance bill, bank statements. There's a check in here. The DIA sent all this material to Tony Shaffer to another person in a box here. And this agency thinks we believe it's credible? It's a joke. This box, you can see, was sent from the Defense Intelligence Agency to Tony Shaffer's lawyer. One of several boxes sent. Thank you all. We need to keep these charts here for the briefing. Okay.
Congressman, who are you asking?
Well, that's the problem I have, you know. Where do you go to? I don't want another commission to investigate a commission. Well, what I've done so far is the IG has already begun theirs. I met with them for 90 minutes.
So they are.
That's already underway. There was a formal letter sent from Duncan Hunter requesting it, and there was a senator who requested it, and another House committee. I don't want to say, no, it was not all of it. I don't say so. But they had 3 separate requests, so that investigation is underway fully, and they have a full staff underway doing it. I talked to the head of GAO last week. He wanted me to call him after I met with the IG. I'm asking the GAO to investigate. They have criminal investigators. I don't have to.
Oh, they do?
Yeah.
Is that the one where that he was
He said, well, certainly we'll
saying
come on.
thank you for your
Oh,
work?
thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay.
Oh, you're asking me to look at the investigation of how they handled Shaffer?
That's what DIA is looking, well, specifically.
Is that the whole
enchilada?
It's the whole enchilada. But Schaefer's specific to DIA because of the way they've basically ruined his
But
career.
you want to...
Oh, I want the whole thing. The criminal investigation is the whole thing. It's a cover-up. Yeah, it's an absolute cover-up. Yes. And why people deliberately did not want this story to be briefed to 9/11 commissioners. I'm convinced the commissioners themselves were never briefed. This was stopped at the staff level, and I'm convinced if you look at it, you see, and here's some interesting things, and you've got to pull this together. The staff that's over there includes Lt.Col. Lt.Col was staff director.
Yeah.
You know where Lt.Col works now? You know where he works now?
Jeff Silva, I called earlier today.
It's Condi Rice's top assistant.
I was at the hearing yesterday.
Which meant back then Condi Rice was the head of the NSC. The NSC staff were briefed in February and March of 2001.
I will.
He works for Kennedy Rice now. He was a staff worker at the commission.
Started out something with thanks for the.
Tony Shaffer will testify under oath that as a part of another top-secret program called Door Hot Galley, NSC staff were briefed in '01 and knew about Able Danger. Steve Cambone was briefed in March of '01 about another program where Able Danger came up.
I'm a little confused now.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks for
Really
coming.
an investigation of what was done to Tony Shaffer.
It's primarily against him, but you can't do that without looking at the whole story. But it's primarily about the way Tony Shaffer has had his career ruined and the destruction of the data. They're looking at those two issues, which are all part of the bigger picture. But the fact is, the bigger issue needs to be looked. Is it complicated? Yes, but I mean, the facts are largely there. And what's amazing is I can't tell you the input I'm getting from military officers around the country, including current uniformed people, including from SOCOM, who are adding bits of information about this. Clearly, I wouldn't make this statement unless I'm absolutely certain that there's a cover-up underway.
And the GA